Arab billionaire bought blind girl as a wife, but fell madly in love with her. In a world of unimaginable wealth, secrets are hidden beneath the glittering surface, and power plays are made behind closed doors. But what happens when a blind African girl is sold for millions to a billionaire Arab executive? What if the man who buys her finds himself falling madly in love with her? Meet Zainab, a young woman with a heart full of dreams, yet trapped in a world of darkness. Her blindness isn't something she was born with, it's a scar from a fire that took away everything she once knew. Her family, her sight, her future. Zainab was left to grow up in a cold world, cared for by an uncle who saw her only as a means to an end. He didn't love her, he never had. He was only interested in one thing: money. Her blindness is an inconvenience, but it's also an opportunity. Uncle Amir's voice was thick with greed as he spoke to the powerful man across from him. I've tried everything for her, but the time has come for her to repay me. Sitting opposite him was Zainab's future husband, Malik Al-Farouk, a billionaire with a reputation for getting what he wanted. His voice was smooth, like silk, but his intentions were far from pure. You're willing to sell your niece to me for 20 million? Malik's eyes glinted with cold ambition. Yes, Malik, I've tried everything else. Uncle Amir's tone was almost pleading now. I'll give her to you. In exchange for the money that will set us free. Malik leaned back in his chair, a wicked smile curling on his lips. Deal. But then Uncle Amir added, his voice lowering to a whisper, you must marry her. Or at least make it look real. I don't want anyone questioning why she's with you, why she's still family. Malik's eyes narrowed. Fine, I'll do whatever it takes to make it work. After all, she's just a blind girl. Zainab sat in the corner of the room, her fingers lightly grazing the worn ivory keys of the old piano her uncle had given her. It was the only escape she had left, a melody that transported her from the bleak, harsh reality of her life to a place of peace. But peace was fleeting. She had overheard the conversation between her uncle and Malik. She had been sold, not like a person, not like a human being, but like an object, a transaction. And the price? $20 million. Zainab's heart shattered in the silence of the garden. She wanted to scream, to cry, but the words stuck in her throat. How had it come to this? Her life had been filled with hardship ever since that fateful fire. A fire that stole her parents, her vision, and her future. It wasn't just her sight that was taken from her, it was her entire identity, her sense of belonging. Uncle Amir had taken her in, but even in his house, she had always felt like an outsider. His wife, Amina, resented her. And her cousin, Rami, did nothing but torment her, playing cruel games to make her stumble and fall, all because of her blindness. But she had the piano. The piano was her refuge. Every note, every chord she played brought her some comfort. It was the only part of her life that felt like it belonged to her. One evening, after hearing her uncle's plans, Zainab sat quietly at the piano, her fingers trembling as she played a lullaby her mother used to sing to her. It was all she had left of the woman who had loved her unconditionally. It was the only part of her life that still made sense. Her uncle came into the garden that evening, his voice thick with excitement. We're rich, Zainab, 20 million richer. Zainab's heart skipped a beat as she heard him speak. Her world shattered with his words. He had sold her, and now, she was nothing but a piece of property. Uncle Amir's grin was wide as he spoke to Amina. I've made the deal. Malik Al-Farouk is going to marry her. Amina raised an eyebrow. She's blind. How can a man like him want her? I don't care. Uncle Amir's voice was cold, his eyes gleaming with greed. We're set for life. I don't care if she's blind. I care about the money. The next day, Zainab was told the news by her uncle. She could hear the pride in his voice, but all she could feel was numbness. There's a man, Malik Al-Farouk. He's rich, and he wants to marry you. It's a good thing, Zainab. A future. Do you understand? Zainab's fingers froze on the piano keys. She didn't understand. How could she? How could she accept being sold like this? But then Amina came into the garden, her voice dripping with mockery. You should be grateful, Zainab. Do you know how many women would kill for a chance like this? But Zainab wasn't grateful. She was broken, and yet, she had no choice. The day arrived when Malik sent a designer dress for Zainab. It was a beautiful pink gown, something she had never dreamed of wearing. But as her fingers brushed the silky fabric, she felt a deep sadness. This wasn't a wedding dress for a love story. This was a costume for a transaction. The dress wasn't for her. It was for him. For Malik. The wedding was held on a luxurious cruise ship, a place where the wealthy gathered, laughing and drinking champagne. Zainab stood at the altar, her hand trembling in Malik's. He was handsome, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit. But to Zainab, he was just a stranger. A man who had bought her life with $20 million. The vows were spoken, but they were nothing more than words. There was no love, no warmth. Only a contract. When the ceremony was over, Zainab felt a strange emptiness. Was this her future? A life spent with a man who saw her as nothing more than a possession? The night was cold as they left the wedding. Malik guided Zainab into a sleek black car. As the car moved through the quiet streets, Zainab stared out the window. The world outside seemed distant and foreign. She had no idea what to expect from Malik. Was he kind beneath his wealth? Or was she just another trophy in his collection? When they arrived at Malik's mansion, Zainab felt like a stranger in her own life. The mansion was grand, but to her, it felt empty. Cold. A place where she was nothing more than a blind wife. Malik led her inside, his presence as distant as ever. He barely spoke, and when he did, his words were cold and detached. As Zainab walked through the mansion, she couldn't help but feel out of place. This wasn't a home. This wasn't love. Later that night, Zainab stood in the bathroom, alone. The warm water from the shower cascaded over her, soothing her aching body. But her mind was elsewhere, lost in a whirlwind of confusion and despair. She had no idea what this life with Malik would be like. Would he ever truly see her? Or was she just a trophy to be paraded around? But what she didn't know was that Malik, watching from outside the bathroom, was starting to feel something he hadn't expected. He was starting to see her. Not just a blind girl, but a woman. A woman who had been forced into this life, and yet, still had a fire within her. The days following the wedding were a blur of opulence and isolation. Zainab's life in Malik's mansion felt like a world apart from everything she had ever known. The grand marble floors, the towering ceilings, the sound of heels clicking against the polished tiles, it all felt foreign to her, as though she didn't belong. Her heart ached with the realization that she was nothing more than a piece in a game, her life a prize won by money. Every time she looked at Malik, she felt a wave of confusion wash over her. Was he just another man who saw her blindness as a weakness? Was she truly just a blind trophy for him to show off at social events? Or was there something deeper beneath his cold exterior? Malik, for his part, hadn't been around much since their arrival. He had business to attend to, always business. The wealth and power that had made him a billionaire kept him away from the woman he had bought. But there were moments, fleeting moments, when their paths crossed, and Zainab would catch a glimpse of something more. Something she couldn't quite name. One evening, as she sat by the grand piano in the corner of the living room, her fingers caressed the keys, playing the same lullaby her mother used to sing. The melody felt like a lifeline, a tether to a time before her life had been turned upside down. She had no idea if Malik was watching, but for the first time since arriving in the mansion, she felt a sense of peace, however brief. That peace was shattered when Malik appeared at the doorway, his eyes dark and unreadable. Zainab didn't look up, she didn't want to acknowledge him. What was the point? He had bought her. He didn't need to pretend to care. But Malik didn't leave. Instead, he walked over slowly, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. He stopped beside the piano, standing silently for a moment as he watched her fingers move over the keys. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and almost tentative. "You're a talented musician," he said, surprising her with the sincerity in his voice. Zainab didn't know how to respond. She had never expected him to acknowledge her music, much less compliment it. "Thank you," she replied quietly, still not meeting his gaze. She didn't trust him. She couldn't. "I've never understood music the way you do," Malik continued, his voice softer now, almost as if he were talking to himself. "I've always been focused on business, on power. But when I listen to you play, it's like I can almost understand." Zainab's heart skipped a beat. Was this the beginning of something? Was this man, this stranger who had bought her life, actually seeing her for who she was? Or was this just another manipulation to keep her in line, to make her believe there was more to this than just a business deal? She couldn't trust him, not yet. Not after everything he had done to her. But something in his voice made her hesitate. He wasn't acting like the cold, distant billionaire she had come to know. This was different. "I didn't ask for this life," Zainab whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't ask to be sold." Malik was silent for a moment, the weight of her words hanging between them. Zainab braced herself for the harsh reality she had come to expect from him, the dismissal, the coldness. But instead, Malik sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of the world. "I didn't ask for this either," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. but I made a choice. And now I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. Zainab's heart raced. What did that mean? Was he trying to connect with her? Was he finally realizing the gravity of the situation? Or was this just another game? Before she could respond, Malik stepped back, his expression clouded with something she couldn't place. I'll let you be, he said, his tone returning to its usual coldness. You deserve some peace. With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Zainab alone with her thoughts, her heart pounding in her chest. What had just happened? Had Malik shown her a glimpse of something real, or was this just another moment of false hope? As the door clicked shut behind him, Zainab's fingers fell back to the keys, the notes blending together into a melody that echoed the uncertainty she felt in her heart. She had been sold, her life was no longer her own. But in the stillness of the night, in the music she played, Zainab wondered if there was more to this life than just survival. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a chance for something more. Something she had never thought possible. But the question remained, would she ever truly be free? Or would she remain trapped in this gilded cage, her fate decided by the man who had bought her? Days passed in a strange, uneasy silence. Malik was increasingly distant, retreating into his world of business and power, while Zainab remained confined to the luxurious mansion, feeling more like a prisoner than a wife. Despite the opulence surrounding her, soft velvet curtains, gilded furniture, crystal chandeliers, Zainab felt as if she were suffocating, trapped in a gilded cage. The mansion was grand, but it felt like a place where she had no voice, no agency. Every day, she went through the motions, walking through the halls, sitting by the piano, playing her songs, but nothing seemed real. The life she had been thrust into felt like a dream, and not the good kind. A nightmare, perhaps, that she couldn't wake from. One morning, Malik surprised her. He didn't send a servant, didn't hide behind his usual coldness. He came to her directly. His footsteps echoed softly in the hallway as he approached the room where Zainab sat playing her piano, the music filling the otherwise silent space. Zainab didn't look up when he entered. She had learned to shut herself off from him, to protect her heart from whatever mixed signals he might send her way. But this time, he didn't leave. He stood there, watching her, until she finished the piece she was playing. When she finally stopped, her fingers resting lightly on the keys, he spoke. I need to talk to you, Zainab, Malik said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Zainab's breath hitched. She hadn't expected this. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this, but she had no choice. She turned to face him slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. You've been distant, she said, her voice quiet but firm. I don't understand why you even bothered to buy me if you're not going to be here. Why did you do it? Malik's face tightened for a moment, and then his eyes softened. There was an emotion there, one Zainab wasn't sure she could name. It wasn't the cold calculation she had come to expect from him, it was something else. Regret? Confusion? Desire? I did it because I was told to, he said, sitting down on the nearby chair, looking more vulnerable than Zainab had ever seen him. Because I thought it was the right thing to do. But it's not as simple as I thought it would be. Zainab raised an eyebrow. You thought it would be simple? You bought me. You're the one who decided this life for me. I didn't think it would be like this, he replied, his voice tinged with something like guilt. I didn't think I would feel guilty. You've been nothing but kind to me, even though I don't deserve it. I never thought that someone like you, someone so beautiful, so strong, even in the face of everything you've been through, would be part of my life. Zainab's heart skipped a beat. This was not what she had expected. This was not the Malik Al-Farouk she had heard about, the cold, calculating billionaire who had bought her like a commodity. This was a man, someone real, someone conflicted. Why are you telling me this? Zainab asked, her voice shaky. After everything I've been through, why now? Because I've started to care about you, Malik admitted, his eyes meeting hers. I never wanted to, but now I don't know what to do with the way I feel. Zainab's breath caught. She wanted to believe him, but she couldn't bring herself to trust someone who had done what he did to her. She had to protect her heart, no matter how much she wanted to believe his words. Don't say that, she said softly, her eyes lowering to the piano keys, her hands trembling. You don't care about me. You don't even know who I am. That's not true, Malik said quickly, his voice full of urgency. I'm learning. I'm trying to understand you, Zainab. But I don't know how to fix this, how to fix what I've done. Zainab couldn't look at him anymore. She could feel the emotions swirling inside of her, and she didn't know what to do with them. Malik had come into her life like a storm, and now, she felt as though she were being swept away by it. She had no control over her emotions anymore. "You can't fix it," she whispered, tears threatening to spill. "You can't undo what you've done. What's been done to me?" Malik stood up and walked over to her, his expression intense. "But I can try to make it right. If you'll let me. I know I've hurt you. But I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just want a chance to show you that I can be more than the man who bought you." Zainab didn't know how to respond. The words were there, in her heart, but she couldn't say them. Couldn't let him see the cracks in her resolve. "Give me a chance," Malik said, his voice softer now. "Just a chance. I'll prove to you that I'm not the man you think I am." Zainab sat in silence, the weight of his words pressing down on her. She didn't know what to do with this newfound tenderness he was offering. She had been so certain that he was just another man using her, but now, she wasn't sure. For the first time since she had come to the mansion, Zainab felt a spark of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. Could she trust him? Could she believe that Malik al-Farouk was capable of love, of something real? The answer wasn't clear, but as she looked into his eyes, something shifted within her. A part of her that had been closed off for so long slowly began to open. But even as she wondered about the possibility of a future with him, Zainab knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. Her journey with Malik was far from over, and whether it led to love or heartbreak, she couldn't predict. But what she did know was that she couldn't turn away from this chance. She would have to face whatever came next, with or without his love. The following days were filled with tension, like the air before a storm. Zainab found herself walking a fine line between hope and caution. She couldn't ignore the way Malik's words had stirred something deep within her. But the past had shaped her into someone who feared being hurt. Could she let herself trust him, knowing the price she had paid to be in his life? Malik, for his part, seemed determined to show her a side of himself that was anything but the cold, business-minded billionaire she had initially known. He spent more time with her, taking her to the gardens, sharing quiet moments by the piano, even asking her about the music she loved so much. He listened when she spoke, really listened, something she hadn't had from anyone in years. But despite the small gestures of kindness, Zainab still couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in someone else's world. Her world had always been small, confined to the narrow spaces of her uncle's house, the cramped quarters where she had been treated like a burden. Now, in this grand mansion, it felt even more foreign. She didn't belong here. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, golden glow across the estate, Zainab sat by the piano, her fingers lightly brushing the keys. The sound echoed through the large, empty room, filling the silence with a melody she had long kept inside. Her fingers moved faster now, her emotions rising as the music poured out of her: sorrow, confusion, anger, everything she had been holding in for so long. She didn't care if Malik was listening. She just needed to play, to release the storm inside her. But then, the door opened behind her, and his voice, deep and soothing, cut through the music. "Zainab?" She stopped playing, her hands still resting on the keys, her heart beating in her chest. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Malik. She could feel him, the way his presence seemed to fill the room. "I've been thinking about what you said the other day," Malik said, his tone heavy with sincerity. "About not being able to fix what's been done. And I understand that. I can't erase the past. But I want to make things right, if you'll let me." Zainab's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. The words were there, just out of reach. "I want to prove to you that I'm not just a man who bought you," Malik continued. "That I'm more than the contract. I want to be someone you can trust. But I know I've got to show you that, not just tell you." Zainab finally turned to look at him. His expression was open, vulnerable, and for the first time, she saw the man behind the power, behind the wealth. The man who, despite everything, seemed to genuinely care. "You want me to trust you?" Zainab whispered. "After everything?" Malik stepped closer, his eyes soft with regret. "I know it's hard, but I'm asking for a chance. A real chance. I don't want you to feel like a prisoner here, Zainab. I don't want you to feel like you don't have a voice." Zainab swallowed hard, her emotions a swirling storm inside her. She wanted to scream, to run far away from him and everything that had happened. But deep down, there was something else. A part of her that yearned for what he was offering, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Connection. A sense of belonging. "Why did you buy me?" Zainab asked, her voice trembling. Was it just about the money? Or was there something more? Malik didn't hesitate. "I bought you because I was told to," he said, his voice steady. "But I stayed because of you. Because I've never met anyone like you before, Zainab." I thought I knew what I wanted, but when I saw you, I realized how little I understood about life. About love, Zainab felt a pang in her chest. She wasn't sure if she could believe him, but for the first time since the day she had arrived in this mansion, she felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her wonder if there was something more waiting for her in this strange new life. I'm scared, Zainab whispered. I don't know what to believe anymore. Malik stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. You don't have to decide everything right now. I'm not asking for anything from you. Just give me a chance to show you that I'm not like the man who bought you. I'm someone who wants to understand you, who wants to give you a life worth living. Zainab felt her heart race. She wanted to say no, to turn away from him, but something inside her pulled her toward him. She had spent her life being invisible, a burden to everyone around her. But here, in this moment, Malik was offering her a chance to be seen. To be heard. I don't know if I can trust you, Zainab said softly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Malik didn't look away. I know, but I'll prove to you that I'm worth trusting. I'll prove to you that this can be something real. For the first time since her arrival in the mansion, Zainab felt like she had a choice. It was terrifying, but it was also liberating. The music began to swell again, softly at first, as if in response to the quiet promise between them. Zainab's fingers moved over the keys, a new melody rising, a melody that felt different, filled with a strange, hopeful energy. For the first time, she wasn't just playing for herself. She was playing for a future that could be hers, if only she could find the courage to embrace it. Malik watched her, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and longing. He knew it wouldn't be easy. They had both been scarred by the choices that had led them here. But in this moment, in this room, he realized something. He had fallen for her, for the woman behind the blind eyes, for the strength in her silence. And somehow, someway, they would figure this out. The days that followed were filled with a delicate tension, like a thin thread being pulled tighter and tighter, threatening to snap at any moment. Malik continued to spend time with Zainab, listening to her music, talking about their lives, and slowly, carefully, trying to build a bridge between the man who had bought her and the woman he was beginning to see as more than a transaction. But Zainab still couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a fantasy, a dream that could crumble at any moment. The scars of her past were still fresh, the betrayal of being sold like an object still burned in her heart. And no matter how much Malik tried to prove his sincerity, Zainab couldn't forget the way everything had started, the way he had bought her life for $20 million. Yet, there was a part of her that wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that the man who had once treated her as property could actually care for her. She wasn't sure if it was love, or simply the longing for a sense of belonging, but there was something in Malik's eyes when he looked at her, something more than mere obligation. One evening, as Zainab sat at the grand piano, lost in the music, Malik walked into the room quietly. He didn't interrupt her this time, but simply stood in the doorway, watching her, waiting for her to finish the piece she was playing. When she finally stopped, her hands lingering on the keys, he stepped forward, his footsteps soft on the carpet. Zainab, Malik said, his voice steady but full of emotion. I know I can't change the past. I know I can't undo the mistakes I made. But I can offer you a choice. A real one. Zainab turned to face him, her heart racing. A choice? She asked softly, almost afraid to believe him. Yes, Malik replied, his gaze unwavering. A choice to be more than just the woman I bought. A choice to live your life on your own terms, to be free of the chains of your past. I want to be the man who helps you do that. I want to be the man you can trust, if you'll let me. Zainab felt her breath catch in her throat. This wasn't the cold, calculating billionaire she had first known. This was someone different, someone real. For the first time, she felt the weight of his words sink into her heart, a heart that had been closed off for so long. She took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. She had spent so much of her life afraid of being hurt, afraid of being betrayed. But in this moment, in the quiet room with Malik standing before her, she realized that she didn't have to live in fear anymore. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did, Zainab said quietly, her voice shaking with emotion. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give you a chance. Malik's eyes softened, and he stepped closer, his hand reaching out toward her. That's all I can ask for, Zainab. A chance. She reached out, her hand trembling as it touched his. For a brief moment, the world seemed to stop. There were no more barriers between them, no more walls. Just the two of them, standing together, facing an uncertain future. Zainab realized then that life was never about waiting for things to be perfect. It was about taking chances, even when it was scary, even when the past loomed large. She had spent so long feeling like she didn't belong, like she was just a burden to everyone around her. But now, for the first time, she saw the possibility of a life where she could be more than just a victim of her circumstances, more than just the girl who had been sold. "You're not perfect, Malik," Zainab whispered, her voice full of vulnerability. "But neither am I, and maybe, just maybe, we can build something together." Malik's smile was small but genuine, and for the first time since they had met, it wasn't just a smile of power or manipulation. It was a smile of hope, a smile that said, "We're in this together. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to prove that to you," he promised. As they stood there, hand in hand, the future was still uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, there always were. But for the first time in a long time, Zainab felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that she could carve out a life for herself, one where she wasn't defined by the past, where she wasn't just someone else's property. She was Zainab, and she had a choice. In the weeks that followed, Zainab began to step into a new version of herself. No longer just the blind girl trapped in a gilded cage, she began to reclaim her voice, her power, and her identity. Malik, though still a mystery in many ways, was determined to support her in every step of this new journey. Their connection was complex, and it wasn't without its struggles, but it was real, something neither of them could deny. Malik had kept his promise. He made no demands of her, gave her the space she needed to heal, and never once made her feel like a commodity. They spent more time together, sharing stories, music, and quiet moments by the piano. Zainab's music, which had once been a silent cry in the night, began to fill the halls of the mansion with a new energy, a sound of freedom and hope. One evening, as they sat together on the terrace, watching the sun dip behind the horizon, Zainab turned to Malik. "I used to think that my life was out of my control," she said softly, her fingers playing with the delicate chain around her neck. "That the choices made for me were all I had. But now, I'm starting to believe that I can change that. I can choose." Malik looked at her, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You've always had the power, Zainab. I just hope I'm not too late in realizing that." She smiled back, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Maybe you're not," she said, a quiet confidence settling in her voice. Malik's eyes softened. "We both have a lot to learn, but I'm ready to face it with you, every step of the way." Zainab nodded, feeling a deep sense of peace settle within her. For the first time since she had been thrust into this whirlwind, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. With Malik, with herself, it wasn't perfect, their relationship was still fragile, and there were moments when doubt crept in. Zainab wondered if Malik's feelings were truly real or if he was simply trying to atone for his past mistakes. But with each day that passed, she began to believe in him more. She began to believe in herself more. As the moon rose above them, casting a soft glow over the garden, Zainab's fingers danced over the keys of the piano once more. The melody that filled the night was different this time, gentler, more hopeful. It wasn't just a song. It was a promise that no matter what had happened in the past, she would keep moving forward. No longer defined by the things that had once bound her, but by the strength she had discovered within. Malik stood quietly beside her, watching the way her fingers glided across the keys, lost in the beauty of the moment. He had bought her life once, but now, he was watching her live it, watching her take control of her own story. Zainab paused for a moment, the music hanging in the air, and then turned to Malik. "Do you hear it?" she asked softly. "The future. It's in the music." Malik smiled, his heart full. "I hear it, Zainab. And I'll be here, with you, for every note." For the first time in a long time, Zainab felt truly free. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was living. And the story of her life, though complicated, was now hers to tell. Together, they stood on the edge of something new. Not just a marriage, not just a transaction, but a partnership. And in that partnership, there was the promise of something neither of them had expected: love. In the end, they weren't just bound by a contract, but by something much more powerful, a love that neither of them had expected but both of them needed. Thank you so much for watching here on Talefold. I hope you enjoyed the journey we've taken together through this story. If you found the twists and turns exciting, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Your support means the world. If you want to see more captivating stories like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for more amazing content coming your way. Thanks again for being part of the Talefold community, and I'll see you in the next video.